Number 8. Dead Dolls. Anatoly Moskvin was an unusual kid. He and his friends would wander around cemeteries and look at graves of random people. That's not super weird because people visit their deceased loved ones at the graves all the time. But for Anatoly, this was a seed that grew into something no one was expecting. One of the days that the boys were exploring, they went to the Krasnaya Etna cemetery, where Anatoly saw the funeral procession of a 12-year-old girl. But this wasn't your typical funeral. According to 11-year-old Anatoly, this was a burial ritual. When the people from the funeral saw Anatoly, multiple men in black came over and took him to the body of the dead girl. The men forced Anatoly to kiss the girl's forehead, even though he didn't want to. The girl's mother then put a wedding ring on his hand and another ring on his daughter's hand. This was an experience that would traumatize any kid, even one that was seemingly okay with being around death. It was an experience that pretty much changed the way he lived his life from that point on. He slowly became obsessed with death. This just got worse for him as an adult. Anatoly claimed to have inspected over 750 cemeteries in the span of only 2.5 years. He also wrote a bunch of books, translations, and research papers on various death-related topics. He considered himself a necropolis and also said that he was an expert when it came to the cemeteries in the Nizhny Novgorod region, which is where he grew up. When the death obsession took over, Anatoly started living a life of isolation. One day, police went to Anatoly's flat to question him about something they were working on, because he was an expert and lived in the area that they had been searching. Police weren't expecting to find what they did. They discovered several dolls in his garage. These weren't regular dolls, though. They were made from the human remains of young girls. They found 26 bodies all scattered around Anatoly's house, with some on his sofa and on his shelves. They even found instructions on how to turn human bodies into dolls. When asked why he did all of this, Anatoly said that he felt bad for dead children and thought that he could possibly bring them back through science or black magic. He had been doing this for over 20 years of his life. Anatoly claims that he had never dug up a grave without the permission of the person inside of it. He also thought the spirits of the body would feel more comfortable and appreciated if they were in a warm place where they would be more willing to talk. But since he couldn't just bring bones with him to his house, he decided to make them into dolls. According to Anatoly, he was fully aware that he was committing a serious crime, but did it anyway because he thought the voices of these children needed to be heard. Anatoly was charged with the desecration of graves and dead bodies and given 5 years in prison. A psychiatric evaluation was administered, and it was revealed that he'd actually suffered from a form of paranoid schizophrenia. In 2012, Leninsky District Court said that he was unfit to stand trial. Instead, he was sentenced to coercive medical measures. Number 7. The Backstabbers. On July 5, 2012, 16-year-old Skylar Neese was reported missing by her parents. She had left for work the day before and never returned. This was extremely concerning because Skylar wasn't the kind of girl to just disappear or stay out without letting anyone know where she was. Later in the day, her mother got a call from one of Skylar's friends, Sheila, who told her that Skylar had snuck out with her and another friend, Rachel. According to Sheila, they spent the whole night driving around, getting high, before the girls dropped Skylar off down the street from her home. After getting this information, the police found security camera footage of Skylar jumping out of her window around midnight and getting into a car with her friends. Since she left on her own accord, Skylar wasn't eligible for an Amber Alert, so all the parents could do was wait, and wait, and wait. They waited for months, but Skylar never came back. In January of 2013, Rachel cracked. She felt extremely guilty and admitted to the murder of Skylar Neese. She also revealed that Sheila was in on it. When the police asked them why they killed their friend, both the girls said they were bored of her. After preparing for weeks, the girls drove Skylar to the Pennsylvania border with all the supplies they needed to get away with murder. They ended up stabbing Skylar over 50 times. They decided to bury her body near a tree. After the police found her remains and confirmed that it was actually Skylar Neese, both the girls were arrested and charged with murder, second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and kidnapping. They were sentenced to over 40 years in prison for their crimes. Number 6. Revenge. 16-year-old Erin Caffey was the typical rebellious teenager that never wanted to go to church with a religious family. She was dating Charlie Wilkinson, who was considered the bad boy of their neighborhood. Obviously, neither of her parents approved of the relationship and told Erin that she needed to break up with Charlie. Erin was furious and started crying, but she agreed to break up with Charlie. But that actually wasn't the case. Erin came to a realization that she would get back at her parents for controlling every little thing in her life. So Erin and Charlie decided to do the worst thing imaginable. They decided to murder her entire family. On March 1st, 2008, Charlie went to Erin's house with his 2 friends and told Erin to come out. They told her that they were going to shoot her parents, but they would need to kill her brothers as well to make sure there were no witnesses. Erin said that she didn't care and told them to do what you gotta do. Her brothers were 8 and 13 years old. Charlie and his friends ended up brutally slaughtering every single person in Erin's family. They thought they would get away with it by lighting the house on fire. But what they didn't know was that Erin's father actually survived being shot several times. He immediately called 911 and was taken to the ICU, where he was treated for his wounds. The rest of the family wasn't so lucky. They suffered from smoke inhalation, which means they were still breathing when the house was on fire. Within hours, everyone involved was arrested, and Charles admitted to the murder. He even revealed that the whole thing was Erin's idea. Erin and Charlie, along with their friends, all received life sentences, with Erin not being eligible for parole until she served a minimum of 40 years. Number 5. Enough is enough. In 1991, a successful 23-year-old model named Omema Nelson married 56-year-old Bill Nelson. At first, everything was rainbows and sunshine for Omema. However, things started going south just a few months into their marriage. Her husband became mentally, physically, and sexually abusive towards her. Around Thanksgiving, Omema had enough of the abuse and completely snapped. On Thanksgiving, she stabbed Bill with scissors several times and beat him with an iron until he was dead. After that, she chopped up his body and boiled some bits and parts. She put his head in the freezer and his hands in a dish mixed with turkey meat. She started panicking and went to her ex-boyfriend's house. She told him that Bill attacked her and she killed him in self-defense. She then told him to get rid of the body and offered him $75,000 for it. Her ex, Jose Esquivel, told her that he would take care of it. But when she left, he actually called the police and told them everything. The police found Bill's remains at their house and arrested Omema for his murder. She admitted to killing him and was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Do you think her crime was justified? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 4. Two-Faced. Lindsay Hawker decided to take a year off school and go to Japan to teach children English. Little did she know that decision would come at the cost of her life. On March 20th, 2007, Lindsay was heading home from a long day at work when a man approached her. He told her he wanted her to be his English teacher. Lindsay, being creeped out by the random stranger, ran home. But the man followed her home and asked her once again to teach him English. Lindsay ended up agreeing after he offered her $35 an hour for the job. They met a few days later for the lesson at a nearby cafe. After the lesson, the man, whose name was Tatsuya Ichihashi, told Lindsay that he had left his wallet at his house and that she should come with him since it was just a few minutes away from the cafe. She reluctantly agreed. That was the last time she was ever seen. Tatsuya ended up murdering Lindsay at his apartment. He put her body in his bathtub, which he later moved to his balcony. He covered her corpse in a decomposition accelerator and soil. Then he planted some flowers. Lindsay's roommates reported her missing and informed the police of Tatsuya Ichihashi. They went to his apartment and found Lindsay's body decomposing in the tub under the soil, but there was no sign of Tatsuya. Tatsuya went on the run and started changing his appearance with plastic surgery, removing his moles and even cutting off his own lip. But the last plastic surgeon he went to recognized him from media outlets and called the police. Tatsuya Ichihashi was arrested and charged with sexual assault and murder. He was given a death sentence, which is pretty rare in Japan. Number 3. The smartwatch. Jeff West met Kathleen Dawn in 2004, and it was basically love at first sight. Just 4 months later, the two ended up getting married and moved to Las Vegas for a fresh start. Their marriage was great, and they even had 2 kids together. However, things started to go downhill when Kathleen became a cam girl. She charged $15.99 a month, and all of Jeff's friends decided to subscribe. He was constantly being teased by everyone he knew, and Jeff started getting really mad. He wanted Kathleen to himself. He didn't want to share her with the world. He told her to stop, but Kathleen just told him to deal with it. They started fighting every day. Jeff decided he had to get rid of her. On January 12, 2018, the two went on a date. The day seemed pretty good, and they went to bed around 10 p.m. However, the next day, Kathleen was found dead outside her house with a bottle of absinthe. When the police found her, it looked like she got hit by a car, but the police were convinced the whole thing was staged. They questioned Jeff, but he had a pretty convincing story. At one point, the police were basically 100% sure that Jeff was the murderer, but they had no proof. That was until Jeff's smartwatch revealed that he was actually awake during the time of the murder. On top of that, the home security app on the watch also showed that the doors were opened and closed at around 10:53. On November 20th, 2020, after a 4-day trial, Jeff was found guilty of manslaughter and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. To this day, Jeff has not admitted to murdering his wife and still says that he was sleeping when she died. Number 2. Young Blood. Mary Bell was born on May 26, 1957 by Betty McCricket, a 16-year-old prostitute. Her mother resented her from birth. The abuse started almost immediately. Betty actually had an older daughter that reported all the horrible things Betty did to Mary. She threw her out of the window and fell 2 stories. By some miracle, Mary survived the fall. Betty even made Mary drink bleach at one point, but that didn't work either. When Mary turned 5 years old, Betty forced her into prostitution. They lived in a pretty poor area, and there wasn't much she could do about it. Having such a horrible childhood, it's no surprise that Mary turned out kinda crazy. To distract herself from everything that was going wrong in her life, she decided to kill people. In May of 1968, 3 mothers went to the police and informed them that Mary had tried to choke their children. However, the police just let it go, since none of the children were seriously injured, and Mary was only 11 years old. And the fact that it was in the 60s probably played a role in it too. A few days later, Mary took a 4-year-old boy to an abandoned house. There, she strangled him to death and just left with a friend, Norma. When the police found his body, they didn't have enough evidence, so they just ruled his death as suicide. Later on, Mary and Norma took 3-year-old Brian Howe to a demolition site and strangled him to death. They also used scissors to cut his hair, cut his entire body, and even mutilated his genitals. On top of that, they carved the letter N, which they later changed to M. At this point, Mary was looking pretty suspicious, and the police brought her in for questioning. Mary was found guilty of manslaughter on December 17, 1968. Number 1. Poisoned. In January of 2020, a 53-year-old South Carolina nurse, Lana Sue Clayton, was arrested for poisoning her husband with eye drops. Her husband, 64-year-old Stephen Clayton, passed away in mid-2018 at a lake near their home. Lana hid Stephen's phone, so he wasn't able to call the ambulance. Lana claims that she didn't want to kill him. Instead, she wanted to make him a little uncomfortable. She also said that she was a victim of abuse and that she was just trying to protect herself. Unfortunately for Lana, the prosecutors didn't believe her at all and thought that she intentionally poisoned Stephen. Stephen Clayton was actually a millionaire, so prosecutors thought she was just out to get his money. Even the judge of the case, Paul Birch, said that her statement didn't make any sense, since Lana could just go to the police if she was actually being abused, or she could have literally just divorced him instead of murdering him. Lana actually told everyone that her husband fell from the roof of their mansion and died. However, the police did a toxicology report, which showed that Stephen actually died from extremely high levels of tetrahydrozoline. It was later revealed that Lana destroyed the will her husband made before she killed him, so that she would get all the money he would leave behind. Lana was charged with manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Thanks for watching. Who do you think was the craziest person on this list? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to hit subscribe for more. See you next time. Bye!